So this past week, I was studying with my Havrutza when she got a call, and she looked at her phone and she says, "Oh, the Malach HaMavet is calling." Now, Malach HaMavet means angel of death. Who was it that was calling her? The funeral director of her city, the local Jewish funeral director. And she answered it. She muted Zoom. She picked it up. She talked for a minute, and she said, "Well," I asked him when I got on the phone, "Is it my friend Jeremy calling, or is it the Malach HaMavet calling?" And in fact, it was her friend Jeremy calling, not to notify her of a death, which often happens when the funeral director calls you. But in fact, he said he took advantage of the fact that he knows that she would answer his call, because every time the funeral director calls you, you answer that phone call. And we found that interesting because as we were studying this week's Torah portion, we learn about the death of Miriam in Numbers chapter 20. And much like when we learn of the death of Sarah, this is kind of a theme about women in Bible, much like when we learn of the death of Sarah, there's not a whole lot written about it. But we do know in our tradition that the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, the messenger responsible for taking our souls from our body when it is time, comes when everybody passes. But the rabbinic sages teach us, however, that 6 of our ancestors merited to be taken from this world not by the Malach HaMavet, not by the angel, the messenger of death, but directly from God, from the divine. So we wonder, how did this occur? How could one possibly be taken to death not in the normal way? And we know from last week that sometimes it happens by very rare circumstances, like being swallowed up in a pit of earth when you do something terrible like Korach. But this goes the other direction. Their actions and their ways of being in the world merited that they were taken from this world, not by the angel of death, not by the Malach HaMavet. There are 6 people that our tradition says merited this. Does anybody have any wild guesses as to who those might be? Say it again. Elijah, not one of them actually. Elijah is taken up alive, it says. So these people died, but that's a very good guess. Other people, like historical, like heroes of the Bible, we're talking. Moshe, that's correct. Who else? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, thank you, Sam. Also Aaron and Miriam. And of those 6 people, one of them is not like the other. One of them, only one, is a woman. And it is the person also that we know the least amount in terms of who she was and who she interacted with and what kind of person she was. The Israelites, what we know is it's described very tersely in this Torah portion. It says that the Israelites, the entire community, arrived at the wilderness of Zin on the first new moon, and the people stayed at Kadesh. And it says there, Miriam died there and was buried. No more. That's all we get. Miriam died there and was buried. And she comes up rather infrequently in the Torah. And so we have to think about what this means. So from that list alone, we know the least about Miriam's life. We know that Abraham, for example, was the first one to understand that God was one, and his life continues to teach us what it means to be faithful. We learn from Isaac about mindfulness and the value of making deliberate choices. Jacob's legacy is one of personal growth and wrestling. Aaron paved the way so that our ancestors would preserve the rituals that connect us with what is sacred. And Moshe Rabbeinu, was our greatest leader and teacher and prophet that we know. So it's no surprise that the rabbinic sages understand the death of those 5 men to be different from the deaths of every other person, including even the most righteous of people that would follow after them. What is surprising is the inclusion of Miriam in this list. It's surprising because the rabbis are not known to come at things from a feminist perspective. And in fact, they were deeply uncomfortable with the idea of the messenger of this kiss that is bestowed when God takes one of these people from the world. And yet they included her in this list. And so we have to ask why. What was it about Miriam that merited her to be taken from this world differently by God directly rather than the Malach HaMavet? And we come to understand that Miriam's legacy is of her deeds and of her actions. She was not a prophet who offered speeches. She did not administer justice. She was not a tribal head. No elders reported to her. We know nothing about a lineage that followed her. Instead, what we know is that Miriam acted shrewdly, and because of her planning and her actions, she was able to save her baby brother's life. We know that she was spiritually intuitive, and she led the Israelites in song and dance as they made their way across the sea, and knew enough that after that moment of trauma and heartache, that what they needed to do was to dance and to celebrate the joy of being alive and being free. And we know that Miriam sustained the Israelites through times of fragility, providing them with water. We know that Miriam's well was the well that followed them throughout the desert, giving them water and sustenance. These kinds of contributions, shrewd actions, spiritual intuition, providing sustenance for people in need, are easy to overlook. They don't always make it into the history books. They don't come with titles or positions of authority. They often happen quietly behind the scenes, in a moment when someone notices what needs to be done and simply does it without fanfare. And I think that's actually really important for us in this moment in time. In a world where the biggest and loudest voices always seem to get the final word, where leadership is most often top-down instead of bottom-up, where strength is so often confused with volume, and where power is tied up in authority, Miriam can offer us something different to strive to. She shows us that we can lead from the center, but also from the sidelines. She does not need to be the one confronting Pharaoh or demanding that our people be set free, nor does she have to be the one up there parting the sea and leading them. Instead, she leads through quiet action. She leads through meaningful relationships. She leads by seeing what people need and responding to that moment and finding a path forward. So my prayer for this Shabbat for all of us is that we too be like the ancient rabbis and recognize all of the different kinds of gifts, all of the different kinds of leadership that come together to make our communities whole. Shabbat Shalom.